Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is a twofer today, two for Tuesday, because Monday you guys are I missed your quiz, and I already told you I'm sorry, so I'm not doing it again. But I will put up a quick little snippet video, soundtrack, and an explanation of what I've been doing. So my buddy George and his tea bucket. So here's a couple pictures of it. I'll try and find them and put them up here. So he got this car. So here's the story of that car. So that car was being built by a company. I think they're based out of California, and they basically build tea bucket kits, and they're a lot like the Total Performance teas from back in the 70s and 80s. They're really cool. They're kind of a raked body they're a box frame that's molded, and they got like a suicide front end. For those of you who don't know, the frame rail's in and the cross member is, then there's a stand off, and then the front spring's there, and the axle is actually in front. That's called a suicide front end or a digger style front end, for those of you who don't know. And so it has that style front end on it. It's got wishbones, which they look like a wishbone. So they're a bracket with they're a bar with an eye bolt that spreads up, and it's basically a trailing arm that bolts to the front and rear axle. So they come like this on both sides. It has equal length wishbones, and I'll show you the pictures of it. It's really well put together, and you can buy this car as a body and a chassis kit that's done. So the front axle, everything's chromed, it's all in, wishbones are in, Curry Ford 9-inch, all that stuff's in, it's all hooked up. Brake lines are all run, and they do some beautiful work, and then it's all powder coated and chromed. And then the body is there's like a polished aluminum firewall. There's a bunch of neat stuff. The car is done. So this car was bought. So the guy on Oahu, don't know his name. He was having this car built. This is his dream car. It's just kind of a sad story. So he was having the car built. He was doing it. It was his dream car. It had a '69 Pontiac GTO motor in it that was all pumped up, has Edelbrock heads on it, and all sorts of stuff. And then he ended up selling it, and another guy I know, Jerry, bought it. So Jerry bought it, and it was a couple years ago, and I was going to do the car and wire it and try and get it going. It's nice, like show car kind of nice to get that stuff done. And then, things just get out of, stuff happens and communication does whatever, and didn't happen. No hard feelings against Jerry, still dig him, he's a cool guy. Has nothing to do with it. But my buddy Georgie, he bought it. Jerry told me it was for sale, and at the same time he told a bunch of other people, and I didn't think George would be interested in it, so I never mentioned it to George. But one day I showed up at George's house, and I'm like, man, that tea bucket looks an awful lot like this one I saw a year ago or so, and it had a Pontiac motor in it, but George had a small block in it with a tunnel ram, and I was like, he's like, oh no, that's the same car, here's the motor right there. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then George, he said he hated wiring, and he wanted to know if I'd help him. So the reason I haven't wired this car is I spent, not last week, but the week before, I spent 3 days and I wired that car completely. And then I spent today, actually, which is Monday, I spent today cleaning it up and actually getting it running, but it has a blower in it now. So, George had trouble with the scoop fitting the carbs on the tunnel ram, so he fixed it by changing the manifold. But the manifold has a belt. So it's got a Win 671, and I went through it. Something had gone through this blower at one point. I don't know what happened, and a couple of the rotors had some nicks, so I went through and cleaned them up and fixed it and made it spin free, and now that's fixed. And then George is having trouble the other day trying to get it running, and he found the problem. Ironically, on the back of the intake manifold, just like this one, there's a 1/8-inch pipe port for running your pressure gauge, and that wasn't there, so it had a huge vacuum leak. Anyway, we got that figured out and got everything dialed in, and it runs good. And I ended up finishing the steering and centering it and doing the suspension and the toe and getting all that going. And he adjusted the rear brakes and fixed the rear shocks. Someone put the rear coilovers on and didn't put washers on the outside, so the bolts went through, and then the coilover could just slide off the mount. It was scary, but the car has never been on the road, never been driven, so he got a drive shaft for it, everything. So we did the final thing. Got the gas pedal where we needed it to be. Dialed it all in. Got everything going. Had a brand new Mallory Unilite, and I told him that thing was going to be junk probably, and ended up being junk. And so we put a dual point distributor in it, just like this one has, only it's the newer Mallory style dual point, and this is an old Excel that's probably my age, which they both run fine. And he has the Edelbrocks on it, and we tuned them with springs and whatnot, and just did like, he had done bigger jets and everything, and was following some advice on the internet, like some keyboard people. And I told him we need to change the springs, so we changed the springs back to weak and did a few things. And it fires up and runs and idles and sounds pretty good. So I'll put a video up of it running. I didn't put any videos of me doing burnouts in it because I didn't have my camera. I couldn't do it all at the same time. And, George didn't know I was going to do it, but he kind of did. He let me pull it out of the driveway. I pulled it out of the garage. And then on his little driveway going into his yard, I just tapped the gas, just kind of, just a real quick blip, like quarter throttle kind. And it lit the big Mickey Thompsons up. Just lit them up like it wasn't even attached to the car. And it's only like 11.5% underdriven. I think I've got a 35 pulley on the bottom, and it has a 39 on top. And I'm going to give him this 33. I have this 33 tooth pulley. I'm going to give him, we're going to put that on the bottom and see if it will underdrive it to like 15%. That'll keep it from being whatever. But it's like a 10-to-1 motor. It was a real legitimate 300 horse, 350 bottom end, and it's had work done and got like I think a 292 comp cam or something in it. And it sounds pretty good. It's not the right duration for blower cams or whatever, but who cares? It was in his other car with a blower a long time ago. But yeah, no, so that's what I was doing this whole time. And why I haven't made a whole lot of progress on this, I've been, trolley and sniper fuel injection system on a Scout, which had a crazy vacuum leak. I can tell you about that story too. In fact, I'll tell you about it. I'll put pictures up on it. So story number 2 that's taking me away from this car is a Scout. My buddy Les has a Scout, and it's a 72 Scout, but an early 71, so early 72, late 71. Has a 345, and this shop over here rebuilt the motor and all that stuff. And if you know anything about internationals and you saw my Instagram picture, you'll see how I figured out there's a major vacuum leak. Well, what they are is they're a shaft-style rocker. And after going through several things trying to diagnose if it had a vacuum leak, I figured I'd pull the intake. And the rocker arms they're a shaft style and they're on stands. So it has pedestals that run into bolts into the head. On each side, there's 9 of them. Well, the update for a different kind of push rod stuff only needs 5 stands, which leaves 4 stands open. Ironically, the intake ports are symmetrical on the head, and so are these 4 bolts. And these 4 bolts for the 4 missing stands happen to run right into the top of the intake port in the head. So there's a 5/16 threaded hole, vacuum leak into the valve cover area of all 8 cylinders, which means that it had equal vacuum leaks in all the holes, which is why that thing was impossible to tune. Once we got that figured out and dialed in, it'll run pretty good. Tomorrow I'm actually tuning on that, which will be Tuesday tomorrow, which is when this video come out, which will be that day. So that day I'll be over at my buddy's Les's after surfing, of course, and I will be tuning in the sniper setup. And then after that, I have to find some time to go work on a 70 Blazer, which someone stuck an LQ9 6-liter in when the truck was in New York. I don't know if I told you about it. It's kind of a rough old Blazer, but this company that did the swap, they weren't too smart. And any of you guys doing LS motors, do not take the thermostat out. Don't pull the thermostat out and cut the center out of the thermostat and throw it away and say, oh, it'll run better. It's not going to work unless you tune the computer to run with no thermostat or low temperature and lower the temperature on what it's trying to use or set the motor temperature at, because the stock computer will try and set it at 205 degrees. They are a 187 degree thermostat. They're two-stage. You have to have the thermostat in those things for it to run properly and get it to temperature. If it runs too cold, the computer will have a heart attack, and that thing had never run right. I told him it was a thermostat. He didn't believe me. We got a thermostat. I threw it in there, and it ran just like the Escalade it came out of. But the fuel pump was going bad. And so what I did for that was I took my test light, my power probe, and my meter, and I went into the computer trigger to the fuel pump relay. I went to the power to the fuel pump relay coming from the fuse box to see if it lost power or dropped voltage, and then I went to the actual fuel pump itself, the power circuit from the other end, to make sure that with my test light, to see if it carried load and actually turn the light on. And if the truck started acting up and dying, I wanted to see if one of these three was dying, and none of them were, which told me the pump actually was junk. And that's what happened, was the pump was like crunching rocks and making noise, and the pump's bad. So Scott ordered a new fuel pump and tank, or a new pump, and it's an air motive pump, and we're going to drop the tank and put the pump in it. And then that Blazer will be on the road driving as it's never driven properly for the first time. So that'll be nice to get that done. And then I always have the trolley to work on, which I'm getting ready to start skinning the sides of it. So it's been busy. The kids and I over there have been going to town. We're doing the steel floor right now, and the driver's area is done, where the footwell is and the seat goes. The steps are done, and the rear wheel wells basically over the tires. So my goal was anywhere, if this thing has to travel from, instead of doing its driving 15 miles an hour and doing its like little mile loop that it does 500 times a day, if it has to go get gas or come over to the other side of the island and it's on the highway and it has a blowout for any reason, I wanted it not to shred the bottom side of the aluminum paneling or the floor, the marine plywood, which is what originally had in there that went bad, and all the rotten metal. This at least has like a skid plate or some sort of protection for the drivers and the occupants, which we're going to eventually sheet the whole floor. I'm going to do a thin piece of aluminum, probably 10 gauge aluminum over the whole floor, maybe 16 gauge or something, sheets, and then laminate that to marine plywood and then coat the whole thing. And then it'll get flooring, and it'll be a big old mess. It'll get sheeted on the side. But anyway, that's what I've been up to, and that's what's going on. But that is not going to stop me from working on this car. I did get some more stuff in the mail. I basically got the rear taillight harness and a few more things, and I'm waiting for, I told you this blower snout was bad. See that shaft? So this is a press fit shaft into the bearings. Obviously it's not press fit anymore. And that snap ring in there is the only thing holding the blower snout, the actual shaft, from coming out of the snout. So I ordered a new shaft, a new snout actually, from Good Vibrations. And since this is a 2 1/4 inch register, and the new snout is coming with a more common 2-inch register, I had to order a different pulley. And so I got a different pulley, snout, and that. And in other news, I also got a bigger radiator for this if I need one. So that's going on. So a lot of progress still needing to be made before I start this thing. But I did this so I wouldn't be tempted to fire it up and drive around just like I did George's car today, which was really fun. Anyway, up go those videos. You guys can see them. And you get 2 for Tuesday as my apology present. I know, it's so awesome of me to do that for you guys. I know. I really appreciate you guys recognizing that awesomeness and humility, because I'm the most humble person I've ever met. And I'll see you guys later. And aloha, and I love you.